Here on Birds 365, McMullen and McDonald. We know it's coming up on Sunday, a trip up the turnpike to MetLife Stadium to take on the Giants. Here to give us Big Blues insight is a guy who comes from day in and day out for the Daily News and also does his Giant podcast, Talking Ball, with Pat Leonard, which you can get where you get your best podcasts. Pat Leonard joins us here on Birds 365. PL, first of all, hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. We haven't talked to you since before the season started. How's your year gone?
Same to you, Jody and John. Yeah, no, it's gone unexpectedly, I think is what I would say. I thought the Giants would be more like the team I've seen the last month rather than a team that started winning games against teams like the Packers in London, the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, going for 2 to win it at the end against the Tennessee Titans on the road in week 1, Jody. I mean, Giants football has not been relevant past Thanksgiving. So you asked me how my Thanksgiving was. It was good because I watched a relevant Giants game that day in Dallas, and this game against the Eagles, while they're deep underdogs, 7-point underdogs, I think at the moment against the Eagles, hey, at least it matters. So in New York, we'll take it.
Yeah, you're right. That 6-1 start, I think, maybe was the most surprising story in the league at that point, Pat, because I thought this team was one of the clear. I looked at them in Chicago as saying, by their actions, we're rebooting. We got to rebuild. We got to go in a different direction. And they start 6-1, but now they've won once since October 30th. Is that just sort of a regression to the mean? Better competition? People figuring out sort of the smoke and mirrors. Brian Daboll's doing a great job. Why do you think the best divergence from that 6-1 start to where we are?
I think you hit on some of it there. The injuries, first of all, they're one of the most injured teams in the league, and they pretty much are every season. So that's caught up to them. They were overcoming some injuries earlier in the year, and some of their key players like Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley primarily haven't missed games. So that's part of the reason they were winning and able to sustain it. But it's caught up to them a little bit, especially on defense. They were winning games early, even though their running game was doing very well, averaging over 170 yards per game early, and that was a huge part of it. Wink Martindale's defense also was one of the best in the league, both on third down and in red zone for the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season. And so they were dictating a little bit how some of these games were going. And credit to Daniel Jones, really. I mean, he's done what they've asked him to do, whether the game plan's been conservative or whether they let him open it up like the second half against Green Bay. He's done what he needed. A little bit with Jones has developed recently, though. He has protected the ball better, guys, than ever before. He was averaging over 1 turnover per game in all 3 of his first NFL seasons. This year, he's only averaging 0.5 turnovers per game. So that's a huge improvement. An issue going into this Eagles game, though, is he has turned the ball over 3 times in the last 4 games, 2 interceptions against the Lions and a lost fumble against Washington. So because the Giants are this team that can only win one tight, low-scoring way, that ends up shining a bright light if Daniel Jones makes those mistakes. But, it's not all on him. Their running game has gone from over 170 per game to about 113, 115 per game. And Saquon Barkley hasn't been the breakout star recently that he was early season either.
All right, let me follow up on a point that you made about Giants being injured. Fact of facts, they've had a bunch of guys miss games. You say what you want about it, but they have been handicapped by injuries. A lot of people question the turf at MetLife Stadium. I get it. You got 2 teams playing there. Somebody's playing there every single week. It's either the Jets or the Giants, and it's not natural grass, it's turf. And there are investigations around the league, and the players making noise about we can't have turf fields. It's got to be grass and the like. How big a deal is it? Is it something that is legitimately adding to a team like the Giants being as injured as much as they are, or is it coincidental in your mind?
I think it does contribute, but the Jets are one of the healthier teams in the league this year, and they play in the same stadium. And so I would say it is an issue. And right at this point, Jody, the interesting thing about that topic is whether it's true or not, every player in the league now hates playing on this turf.
Yeah.
And they all believe it is a huge issue. And so That's why I talked to John Mara about it. I mean, they already came out and said they're going to change it. And Mara said he's going to listen to players like Julian Love, their player representative, and others, because all the players want grass. The Giants said they're going to go to some new turf. The players want grass. So I don't know if they're going to put grass into the stadium for a variety of reasons, namely business reasons, so they can host other events throughout the rest of the year. But the players will have a voice in that. But to answer your question, Jody, the training staff and the way the Giants manage these players' bodies is something also that John Mara acknowledged to me that he's continually looking at and evaluating, because the fact of the matter is they have been the most injured team in the league, or one of them now, across their last 5 or 4 coaches. So the coaching staffs, the strength and conditioning coach, and all the support staff has changed, but the consistent thing has been, and even the turf has changed actually, because the turf that's in the stadium now, they put new turf down prior to 2020. So there's a deeper seated and deeper rooted issue here, and the Giants are trying to get to the bottom of it. And so I would expect certain changes to be made to address that after this season. We'll see what they are.
Yeah, I was kind of amazed how inundated I was this week, Pat, with sort of pitches about the turf at MetLife Stadium. And you're right. I mean, once the players get it in their head that they don't want to play there, it becomes a bigger issue. And I think that's where we are. But it's interesting you bring up the Jets have been relatively healthy. So the fact that is going over multiple regimes and they've changed, what does Brian Daboll say about that as far as the health aspect of it?
Oh, he doesn't say much. That's a sensitive topic around here. How they take care of players' bodies, injuries, the training staff. My answer to that would be this. When Joe Judge was the coach prior to Brian Daboll, they were, running penalty laps at times. They were working very hard in the offseason, doing a lot of training that a lot of teams in the league aren't doing and are practicing in flip-flops. And the Giants were actually pretty healthy in 2020. Last year, obviously, that changed. And Judge and his staff on their way out, I think, took a lot of the blame for, according to their critics, running the team into the ground. But what Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen and the Giants training staff and the Giants did off of that was they reacted by taking workloads off players' bodies, giving them rest days and going a lot lighter in their normal practices, both in the length and and how grueling they were compared to what Judge had done. Now, the result, John, has been that the team has been just as, if not more, injured. So what Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen have said is not much other than we continue to confer with our sports science staff, with our training staff. But really, it's an issue that, in my opinion, the organization has blamed others for a problem that is still ongoing, if that makes sense. So Daboll is not going to come out and blame somebody or finger point, because really he is a part of the team that has organized this year's strategy that has proved to fail so far on the injury front.
All right, Pat, I want to ask you about a specific guy, and that is your tight end Bellinger. Got off to a nice start this year, got hurt, missed over a month, came back last week, caught all 5 balls that came his way, but only amassed 24 yards on 5 catches. That's not a whole hell of a lot per catch. How key is he this week to the Giants' offense scheme coming in against the Eagles? I expect them to try and run a little bit deeper routes than 5 yards per catch. How big is his re-addition to this Giant team?
Well, it's important because they feel like he is well-rounded and probably their most well-rounded tight end in being able to both block and catch balls out in space. He is not a speedy guy who can stretch the field much, though, Jody. And also, the Giants' biggest issue in their passing game, and you're seeing it looking at the stats and mentioning that, they can't protect Daniel Jones right now well enough to drive the ball downfield often. They've hit Darius Slayton, I would say, they're basically averaging 1 deep throw to Darius Slayton a game, maybe the last 5. So Jones and Slayton have connected there, and that's worked. But up the middle, over the seam, you would see Bellinger do more of like a crosser catch and run element and then try to get up the sideline. But he is not a fast, lightning quick. He's certainly not, I know he's not playing in this game, but he's certainly not a Dallas Goedert where you're worried just as much about him catching a ball 25 yards downfield as you are AJ Brown.
Yeah. I want to talk about the guy throwing the football. Before you came on, Pat, Jody and I were discussing Daniel Jones. And I want to get your thoughts from week 1 to where we are now, because obviously the Giants didn't pick up the 50-year option. It seemed like they were ready to turn the page, but they couldn't do anything. Now he's had his best season. And, I've made the Alex Smith comps in that, when you're a top 10 pick and Alex was number 1 overall, Daniel was number 6, you got high expectations. But, when Alex Smith kind of figured it out, he started winning games, maybe not in the sexiest of ways. Has the Giants' philosophy, thought process on Daniel Jones changed, or do they want to get better long-term at the quarterback position?
Both. I think he has certainly proved to them and to me and to everybody else, I agree with you. I think he's proven he's a good quarterback. Like before this year, I think a lot of people thought, you could compare him to most quarterbacks around the league and say, well, maybe I'd rather have the other guy. I don't think it's that way anymore. I think you'd rather have him right now, frankly, than half the quarterbacks we've seen play this season in the league. He can run, which is, as you guys know, in Philadelphia, not only is valuable to a team like the Eagles and Jalen Hurts, who is doing it better than anybody, but in the modern NFL, where defenses have gotten smaller to address all these pass-heavy offenses, and now the teams like the Eagles, the Giants, the Ravens, the Bears are taking advantage of these multiple dual-threat quarterbacks. Jones, and really with Mike Kafka, the OC, and Brian Daboll as head coach, they've been able to unlock what Jones can do as a runner to complement Barkley in the run game, and then to allow him to drop back, maybe sometimes taking a little bit pressure off of his dropbacks in the pocket because teams know that he can scamper. That said, the turnovers can't happen. Philadelphia obviously leads the league in takeaways and turnover margin. And that's something that they've consistently harped on with Jones, and he's done a great job with. I think it's a bit unfair, like I said earlier, that I think his turnovers are magnified because the Giants are so unable to score 30 points. They can't win high-scoring games, and so every turnover he commits is magnified. For the future, John, I think that Jones has earned the right to be franchise tagged for next year. Now, they have a choice to make of whether to franchise Saquon Barkley and then what to do at quarterback, or franchise tag Daniel Jones and maybe sign Saquon. I think Jones has earned the right maybe to get a transition tag for next year because the Giants have so far won their way out of a top 5 pick, right?
Yeah.
Top 7 pick, whatever. Not to mention that this quarterback class, frankly, doesn't look as strong, I think, to me and to a lot of people around the league as it did 5 months ago. So I think that Jones right now, as I sit here this moment, is the Giants quarterback next year. I don't know about beyond that, but I think that right now he has earned the right. That said, if they continue to slide, they've only won 1 of their last 5 games. And if you finish the season, in your final 8 with 2 wins, let's say 2-5-1, then that would probably change.
Understood. All right, Pat, Eagle fans would like to say thank you very much before you even answer the question, but please answer this one. Why did Giants cut James Bradberry?
I think he's going to tell you why they shouldn't have on Sunday. I think that's my answer to that. That's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked me because at the time it was presented as just a salary cap decision. And certainly that was a part of it. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't a part of it. It absolutely was. And it was the reason that they were looking so closely at a player like him in the first place. That said, this defensive staff looked at how he thrives and where he thrives as a cover corner, and they decided that schematically they preferred other players. So both of those things happened, and Bradberry knows that second thing happened. Let me tell you, like that's a very true thing. Whether or not people in New York want to just say it was a salary cap casualty, This was also a football decision.
Mm-hmm.
So James Bradberry knows that. Essentially, Wink Martindale likes to play more press man on the outside.
Yeah.
They felt like Bradberry thrives more in those zones, matchup zones, drop concepts. And even if that's true that he's better at that than the press man, the Giants and Pat Graham, especially in James Bradberry's first year when he was healthy, they pressed with him and he was great. They didn't press all the time, but he was great. So, and the Giants only have 4 interceptions this whole year, all season. They've struggled at taking the ball away. And as you have seen, James Bradberry does not struggle at taking the ball away when the ball is in his direction. Darius Slayton, the Giants receiver, said to us this week that Slay and Bradberry is the best cover corner tandem they have faced all year. And that's why the Giants are kind of in a pickle here, because their running game has slowed down. And they've actually, forgot to mention this in the Daniel Jones answer, Brian Daboll is starting to coach Daniel Jones more conservatively than ever. So in New York, the conversation is you got to let Daniel Jones, who's having a good season, rip the ball, make some throws, and prove he's the guy. But you have James Bradberry and Darius Slay sitting there.
Yeah, this is not the week for it. Yeah, this is not the week for it. You bring up an interesting point, though, that I think is a very good one, Pat. Wink Martindale is, the guy. He's coming from the buses. They park the buses. Here comes Wink with the blitz. Bradberry's this great, savvy football IQ zone corner. The Eagles play quarters, cover 2, cover 6, cover 8, all those matchup zones. He is a better fit for the Eagles scheme than the Giants scheme. And I think that's a very astute point that maybe fans don't realize. I mean, not everybody fits in every scheme as well. And I think James is better in Philadelphia than he would be in New York. You think that's fair?
I completely agree with that. I think he ends up in a better situation for himself. My criticism of the Giants getting rid of him in that context, though, even though, like you said, it makes sense schematically and X's and O's wise, the Giants aren't like the Eagles where they have really good or great players all over their roster. So
when you get a good player, you should probably keep them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about one of those good players the Giants have. And he's kind of made a couple plays, flashed a little bit the last couple of weeks, and that's Thibodeaux, who they took high in the first round this past year. Before the season started, question, how are they going to use him? Where's he going to fit? How is he going to play in the Wink Martindale system? We've seen growth as the second half of the year. I know he had some injury issues before the year started. How much has he improved over the course of the year? How much is he one of the main staples of the Giant team going forward?
He's improved, and also he needs to continue to improve to get them where they need to go, which is really only to win 2, maybe 3 more games to get into the playoffs. He got hurt, if you remember, in the preseason. He hurt his knee, sprained his MCL. And from my vantage point, from talking to people around him, like, I think the healthier he's gotten, the better he's gotten. That hasn't been a coincidence. He has not made a consistent impact. So in the Washington game last week, you didn't hear his name much. You didn't see his number much. You didn't see him affecting many plays. But at the end of games, he finds his way to the quarterback, it seems, and increasingly has to make a play. So he won them the Baltimore game with a sack fumble on Lamar Jackson earlier in the year. He got to Dak Prescott early in the third quarter in Dallas in Thanksgiving, which turns into a blowout, but he misses the sack, but he gets there. And if he wraps up Dak, that could have changed that whole game and the whole landscape of the NFC East. He sacks Taylor Heineke in the overtime period near the goal line of Washington on third down, or on second down, I believe, and makes a play that ends up, obviously, Brian Daboll and the Giants only get a tie out of it. But Thibodeaux made the play of the game in overtime on defense. Now, that said, he was free running to Taylor Heineke from behind him. And instead of ripping the ball out, he just gave him a huge shot in the back and knocked the quarterback over. So this is where being the rookie comes in. It's like, oh, man, you got there. Go get the ball and win us the game. So those are the little things he's still tweaking. But I would just say this. He loves the moment. And the most interesting thing about him is that while he hasn't had the rookie year of like Aiden Hutchinson, who was drafted ahead of him in Detroit, he salivates when the spotlight is on him and the moment is brightest. And you can tell that he wants to make the big play that's going to lead the top 10. And we've seen him do it about 4 or 5 times now this year in different spots, even in Jacksonville. And so that's what the Eagles have to be wary of, especially if this game is close down the stretch.
The Giants had 2 top 10 picks, and the other one has had a slower start, I think it would be fair to say, than Kayvon Thibodeaux. Evan Neal. The offensive line has been an issue with the Giants for years, Pat. It seems like Andrew Thomas is, finally caught on. He's playing at a really high level. How about the rest of the offensive line? How bad has it been? They ran the football for obviously early in the season with Saquon Barkley, but it seems individually the offensive line is still having a lot of issues.
Yeah, John, they are. They're actually coming off arguably their worst game on the interior all season against Washington, which obviously has a formidable front, especially in the middle with John Allen and Daron Payne. You're right. Thomas is playing great. Left guard has been a revolving door due to injury. They really miss. I honestly can't believe I'm saying it based on the fact that he was just a rotational backup prior to this, but Ben Bredesen, the Michigan product, a guy they got in a trade a couple years ago from the Baltimore Ravens, he was their left guard this year and really was playing well. Sprained his PCL in his knee. He's been out. It's possible he comes back for this Eagles game, but after talking to him yesterday, I got the feeling it's more likely he's coming back against Washington for the game that probably will decide a playoff spot. But they need him there because Nick Gates was at left guard before against Washington, really struggled. Josh Azudu, the rookie there, has struggled. Jack Anderson, whatever. Center, John Feliciano is back. Gates had played there before. That's been a rotation. Feliciano is a tough, hard-nosed football guy. He's not the reason that the line has been bad recently, but he hasn't been elite either. Their right guard, Mark Lewinsky, they signed to big money in free agency. His back's been locking up on him lately. He had a rough game, especially against Washington. Though the right side of the line, including Evan Neal, did block up very well on Saquon Barkley's touchdown run against the Commanders defense. Evan Neal actually, to me, has not had as bad of a season as I think the perception is, because I think a lot of people saw that Dallas game in week 3 and said, whoa, right?
Yeah. That's everybody with Micah, though, Micah Parsons and that Dallas pass rush.
DeMarcus Lawrence, Parsons. And well, he got hurt. So he just came back into the lineup. He hurt his knee. Again, injuries, a theme with the Giants this year. But in pass protection, Evan Neal's been really good, and in run, he's been really good outside of that Dallas game, and a couple rushes here and there you could throw onto the tape. And in run game, he's been fine. I think that the interior of the Giants' offensive line is what is causing them the most problems. And I'm not looking at Evan Neal and saying I'm really worried about this kid. One untold story that the Giants have been very delicate about answering questions about is, not to get too deep in the weeds, but early in the season, their offensive line coach, Bobby Johnson, was coaching these guys a lot to attack and do these fire sets where they try to get up on the pass rusher early. And the reason is because they're running a lot of RPOs and they want every play and blocking scheme to look the same. But that's not what Evan Neal does well. What he does well is drops and sets. And so the Giants coaching staff had to figure out, we should stop asking this guy to do things that he doesn't do well. We drafted him to do what he does best. And so they have stopped asking him to do as much of those things, and therefore his play has improved.
Very good. All right, Pat, you probably didn't hear this, but hour number 1, I chided my partner and his partner at Sports Illustrated, Ed Kratz, for not being down at the NovaCare complex on the lookout for Odell Beckham Jr. since Mike Florio had him potentially signing with the Eagles yesterday. The Giants have not been near as undercover. They've had meetings with Odell. They've talked to Odell about potentially coming back. The Cowboys kind of let it leak out that, this guy wouldn't be cleared to play if we were to put his name on a contract. We kind of need him now. The Giants kind of need him now, too, with their wide receiver room being what it is. Is Odell going back to New York?
It's possible. It's possible. Just so you know, I hope you're proud of me. Nick Sirianni's the first question to him during his New York media session this week on a conference call, I asked him flat out, "You interested in OBJ?" So I wasn't going to let that. I wasn't going to let that.
Now, how did Nick answer? Because he didn't give us any. He had any interest in bringing OBJ.
Yeah,
in.
he didn't say heck no, but he said he went on a list of how much he loved all their receivers and said, "We love what we have here."
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. But on the Giants end, I mean, they had this big dinner with him. John Mara ownership was in attendance. Mara's been a huge part of, talking to Odell about this. There's the famous, scene and when Odell got traded to Cleveland by Dave Gettleman years ago, John Mara told us that his grandchildren were essentially like, bawling their eyes out with their Beckham jerseys on. Like, why'd you trade our favorite player? And so there's a lot to the history, the emotions, the off field, as well as the on field. You're right. The Giants need him. I talked to Julian Love the other day, their captain and safety. He was saying that the word he used is light in the receiver room. It's a nice way of saying it. The interesting thing, though, obviously, as you said, it's come out of Dallas. And really the feeling we've gotten for all these visits is that Odell may be ready to play soon, but he's not ready to play yet. And so for the Giants, are you paying him money into 2023 for the possibility and the hope that he can join you for the playoffs? And if Odell is ready for the playoffs, does he wait to sign until week 18 or right after the final regular season games? Does he wait that long? But then is he ready to play in your first game if he only gets there on a Tuesday and you're playing on a Sunday? I think the most likely scenario, if he becomes a Giant, is that he signs with them in March when free agency hits, because the question around Odell right now is, well, if you're not healthy, what incentive is there to really just play 3 games this winter? My personal opinion, not to go too long on this, but my personal opinion is he should call the Chiefs. If he really wants to play this playoffs, I'm calling Andy Reid, and I'm saying, I know you can give me 15 plays in the AFC Championship game, and I can score a touchdown and have 4 catches for 60 yards. That's what I'm doing if I'm Odell.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, it makes sense to me because OBJ was so great for the Giants earlier in his career. He hasn't been Odell Beckham Jr. since arguably he left the Giants. I mean, he had the one decent season with Cleveland, then kind of fell off there. Was a contributor to the Rams, but let's be honest, that was Cooper Kupp's show. It seems like, though, when you say those initials, Pat, OBJ, people think of OBJ as rookie, second season, third season New York, and basically Justin Jefferson's breaking all his young receiver records now. He was spectacular. He's not that guy now, is he? Is there a belief in the Giants that when he is healthy, he's going to be that guy?
No, not you're right that the reality is he's not what he used to be. But I think the important stat for why teams are recruiting him hard now is he played 12 games with the Rams last year after he went over there from Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
He scored 7 touchdowns in those 12 games.
Yeah.
And he caught their first touchdown of the Super Bowl and looked like he was ready for a 200-yard game in that game until he got hurt, frankly. Eli Apple. So he is not Odell Beckham Jr. one-handed catch for the Giants back in the day, blowing every record out of the water. But these teams do look at what the Rams did with him last year and say, lightning in a bottle, still possible with this guy. So that's the part about, he's not what he was, but look what he did pretty recently. The interesting thing, John, is like, it sounds like Odell wants to play like, let's say he joined a team and he was only able to play 2 playoff games in the Super Bowl. It sounds like he really does still want to do that rather than just wait till March, which is interesting to me. Because I'm not sure if he hadn't won a ring yet, I would think, he wants to win his Super Bowl. He hasn't won a Super Bowl, but he just won. So, I'm a bit confused by that insistence. And then the final thing I would say is, man, it would look really weird to do this whole free agency tour and then not sign.
Yeah.
So
well, guys get addicted to that ring shopping, Pat. I mean, in Dominic and Sue, same thing here. It's like, why are you doing it? You got one, but and they want another one.
You need one free chance.
It gets addicting when you get that ring. That would be my only explanation for it. That I can think of.
Pat, assuming Odell Beckham Jr. does not sign with the Giants today and gets ready to play by Sunday, Giant fans, Pat Leonard, Giant players and coaching staff have to come up with something that they can tap into to beat a more talented, better record Philadelphia Eagle team than a Giant team. What's their best shot? If there's something either they can do or take advantage of the Eagles not being able to do, what's the Giants' best shot at winning this game this week?
It's running Saquon Barkley outside and not right into Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis and Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph and company. You could go on and on. Geez, these Eagles lines.
Yeah.
So it's running Saquon Barkley outside. It is probably running a ton of read options where you're either handing it to Barkley outside, or when the Eagles finally commit to that or do commit to that, Jones keeps it and runs. And that's really the 1-2 punch that the Giants have had effectiveness with keeping drives alive. As far as the passing game goes, guys, I don't know. Darius Slayton has been their top option. They're very thin there. You asked the right question, Jody, about Bellinger, in the sense that you understand and you see that if you can attack the Eagles over the middle in the passing game, you could do some damage. I'm just not sure Bellinger can do the level of damage over the middle that you are talking about that is required to beat the Eagles. The bottom line is they need to play a clean game, no turnovers. So the Giants need to not turn the ball over. Saquon needs to turn back the clock to one of his, 180, 170 yard rushing games for earlier in the year. And the Giants defense, they are not going to stop the Eagles. What they need to do is bend but not break. And that's been tough for them with Adoree Jackson, their top corner, out. Xavier McKinney, their starting free safety, out. And a lot of these injuries. But they're just going to have to come up with these. One thing Wink Martindale does is he will scheme. I mentioned Thibodeaux earlier about how he gets to the quarterback in key moments. Wink Martindale saves the play calls and the schemes for those moments. So that when he sacked Taylor Heineke in overtime, it was because they sent a blitzer right into the tackle on the left side of Washington's line, and their left tackle had to make a quick decision on who to get. He tried to touch the blitzer inside and then go out to Thibodeaux, and it was too late. So the Eagles just need to make sure they don't fall victim to any of those schemes. And, this is all why the Eagles are favored by 7 on the road.
Yeah. You can read them every single day in the Daily News, be it in paper. For those of you in North Jersey who are Eagle fans who grab the Daily News, or online at NewYorkDailyNews.com. And you should check out his podcast, Talking Ball, with Pat Leonard. He did some good talking with us today. We appreciate you talking ball, Pat Leonard. Thank you much. Beware in the press box on time. John McMullen has been sick for like a month and a half.
16 weeks.
Don't let him get
rid of
on
the
you,
call,
buddy.
Pat. Yes.
Hey, don't ask the Giants medical staff for any help, man. Yeah. Hey, Jody and John, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Pat.
Our pleasure. Pat Leonard, New York Daily News, here with us on Birds 365. Good dude, and gave us some good insight as well. J-Mac and J-Mac coming back. If we run a little late, they owe us a minute. Kerr went late today, so we'll try and hit We'll try and hit the top of the hour and get Saratella started on time, but no promises.